Okay, hello YouTube. Today we're going to be going over the two knights defense. After e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, we're going to have the two knights defense, and we're going to be taking a look at knight g5. And, of course, this move, it double attacks the f7 square, and black has to respond somehow, and basically one of the only ways to prevent this attack is to play the move pawn to d5. Of course, it's also possible to completely ignore it. We can play bishop c5, and this is a whole nother box of worms. So after pawn to d5, we're going to play e captures d5, and today we're going to be specifically looking at the Ulvstad variation and/or the Fritz variation. So it could begin with the move either knight d4 or the move b5. So b5 would be called the Ulvstad, and knight to d4 would be called the Fritz variation. So if you like content like this and you want to see more of it, please hit that subscribe button and click on your notification icon. So the two knights defense, in the Italian game, when you play this knight g5, when you play this knight attack and you threaten this fork, I think this is one of those openings that's kind of strange because when I was a Scholastic player, it was probably one of these things that was just one of my favorite things to see. Like if I saw the two knights defense and I got an opportunity to play knight g5, I was really, really happy because, of course, you could win a lot of early games. There was a lot of, on the Scholastic level, kids would miss that, the pawn is hanging in the first place. So, you could win a lot of games that way. And then another way that you could win a lot of games is you would oftentimes get a chance to play the fried liver attack, and you could sacrifice material, and you could get this great attacking position with the white pieces, and it was really, really good. But as you become a better player, when you get to, even just the expert level or the master level or above, the script gets flipped on this opening. It's usually black that's going to be the one sacrificing the material, and he's the one that's going to get to have all the fun. He's the one that's going to have tons and tons of play, and you're the one that's going to be trying to prove that you can hang on to an extra pawn. Because that's basically what this move does. Knight g5 wins a pawn by force. After d5, e takes d5, since it's not really desirable to allow the fried liver with knight takes d5, knight f7, black has to pick some way to give you this pawn. And he can pick a number of different ways to give you this pawn. He's got several options. He's got knight a5. This is by far and away the most common move, and really the most solid in terms of its reputation for just giving up the pawn in the most solid possible way and having some type of counterplay for this pawn. But for a while, the Fritz and the Ulvstad, knight d4 and b5, were kind of killing this opening. Now, one benefit that you have as white is you can have basically the same preparation against both the Fritz and the Ulvstad. Because against the Ulvstad, at this point in time, the respected best move is just to immediately retreat this bishop with the move bishop f1. Now, the reason for this, and I know this seems like a strange move, and this is one of the issues with defending positions versus attacking. When you're defending, you can take your general principles and you can throw them right out the window. Other than, maybe try not to move pawns, there's not a whole lot of principles that you're going to follow when you're going to be defending other than make the best move. Bishop f1, taking your developed piece and moving it back to its original square, is not a natural move. Attacking in chess is way more fun. When you're attacking, you're going to be trying to play natural moves every single move. Let's just try to bring out a new piece with every single move that we play, and it's super, super easy to find aggressive attacking moves. It's really difficult to find the most accurate defensive moves. But bishop f1 is grounded in a really good idea. Basically, we're worried that black is going to make his next move like queen d5. So if we were to play bishop takes b5, one issue is that this queen d5 comes, and it's going to be a double attack against b5 and g2. And even if we defend this bishop with a tempo, this is all very natural and all well and good for white. Black is going to take here on g2, and this is supposed to be a giant nothing burger for white. White isn't supposed to have any type of advantage to write home about. And that is what we're going for. We're trying to get some sort of advantage with white. After queen f3, and then say knight takes f3, after something as simple as just bishop d7, breaking this pin, black is supposed to be doing okay in these positions. This is supposed to be roundabout equal. So black is actually supposed to be doing a-okay here. He's gotten his pawn back, and white just doesn't have a whole lot to write home about. Neither does black if white plays correctly. But this is just equality and this is nothing. So white wants to play for an advantage, so what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to retreat this bishop to the f1 square. And the whole point is, if now queen takes d5, we can meet this with knight c3, and there's not going to be a queen captures g2. And in fact, queen d5 is just really a mistake, because after queen d5, then we're going to come back out. We're going to play bishop takes b5, and this position is advantage white, and more importantly, it's a really easy advantage white. After just something like bishop d6 castles kingside, this is major advantage white without really much of a fight. White's got the extra pawn. White's got good development. Black's development is going to be kind of awkward. I mean, not really awkward, but it doesn't matter because White's development isn't awkward at all either. So White's basically got the pawn and he's consolidated it, so everything's fine. So going back, queen takes d5 is, of course, not the way we're going to have to play this. We're going to have to play knight d4. And that's why we're covering the Fritz and the Ulvstad together, because we could have gotten to this from a slightly different move order. We could have gotten to this from the move order knight d4 immediately, and then pawn c3 kicking that knight, b5, bishop f1 is the exact same position. So you don't have to prep two lines. If you've got a line prepped for the Fritz, you've got a line prepped for the Ulvstad. You just got to remember to retreat that bishop to f1 immediately when they play b5, and on knight d4, c3, b5, bishop f1 is the exact same move order. So here's where things get confusing. Knight takes d5. And now this position is, okay, I mean, let's just be honest. This position is a giant mess. Black has tons of space, tons of play, tons of initiative, and White just needs to find the absolute best moves. Now, I'm going to be completely honest. Even with modern engines, it's not clear exactly what the best play is here for White. So I'm absolutely not going to lie. There's actually a lot of options. It's really not clear which path we should go down. The engines recommend all kinds of stuff from here, and it's not really clear which one of these is better. I know which ones I tend to lean towards. I tend to lean towards kind of the old main line in this position after knight takes d5. I tend to lean towards the move knight to e4. I also tend to lean towards moves like possibly cx d4. But basically there's like 4 moves that are potentially reasonable in this position. There's knight e4, there's cx d4, there's knight takes f7, which I have doubts about. But maybe this is acceptable. And of course there is also pawn to h4. So the idea is you play h4 and you make them play another move before you play knight back to e4. So this is also possible. I'm a little leery about pushing pawns on my king side when I might be castling over there someday. So I don't necessarily like this idea of playing pawn to h4. I don't think that there's a huge advantage to it, and it goes against kind of my positional leanings. I think that this, including this move, basically means that I've precluded myself from castling for reasons that I can't figure out. So not a fan of this one, and I'm just not going to be covering it. But I will cover the other moves just to give you an idea of kind of what's going on. So knight f7 is kind of interesting. It's desperado sacrifice. The idea is that I play this desperado and then I'm going to take on d4. So this is the idea, is both knights are hanging. The knight on g5 is hanging and the knight on d4 is hanging. So we don't necessarily have to move our knight. And of course we also have the option of desperadoing our knight. So the desperado at least makes a certain amount of sense, but our king is in the middle and we have no development. Of course, we can say almost the same thing for black. So like I said, these positions are a little insane. So we have this capture and then queen f3, and then here's the actual theory. I really can't make this stuff up. These are wild, aggressive positions that just require a lot of exact theoretical knowledge and a lot of engine work. So this isn't something you're going to be able to play just from general principles alone. The move here is knight f6, sacrificing the rook on a8, and then we're going to have bishop c5. So here's the whole idea is, this king is still very much in the middle of the board. There's a lot of threats against this king. So again, I mean, if you're going to play this position with white, have this completely prepped with the white pieces. It is very, very easy to get mated here. It really doesn't take very much. And the theoretical line that I came up with using Stockfish, by the way, is absolutely insane. So let's keep that in mind. So the next move here is queen c6. Apparently all other moves are bad. You have to move your queen again. Like, again, applying general principles to this position and being like, okay, I just need to develop a piece, etc. No, you need to play the move where you don't die. And apparently queen c6 is the move where you don't die. So queen c6, and now there's two moves that have been played here. There's queen e7 that has actually been played. And then the engine recommendation is actually just queen e8 to go ahead and exchange queens. After the engine recommendation, at least white's moves are a little bit easier to find. You have to exchange queens and you have to play king d1. And after knight to e4, black is obviously getting a lot of stuff for his material. White still hasn't developed a single piece, and this does compensate for the fact that black is now down an entire rook. Because we're going to have to start running. We have to run, and we have to somehow try to develop the rest of our pieces. So king c2, knight f2. Don't have time to save the rook on h1. We would play something like b4, bishop f5 check. So black is still developing with tempo and very, very natural. King b3, knight takes rook. But now we get some time. We can do some stuff. So bc5, we're taking some material. Rook to e1. The bishop on f1 can go away too. We haven't moved it yet either. Knight a3, maybe we can just develop the rest of our queen side and we'll be okay. Bishop f5, king b4, rook f1, knight takes b5, knight f2, bishop b2, and now finally after knight here check, king a5, all of our pieces are finally developed. Yay! So now rook a1, bishop a1, takes, knight back, and after the rest of the liquidation, white is actually still up a pawn. Yeah, you only had to memorize 28 moves of computer preparation to get there. So no big deal. What's the problem? Now you can just play this endgame for a win. And the computer says that black should actually be able to hold the endgame. Equality is actually the actual assessment here. Black is probably holding this endgame in spite of being down a pawn, but white can certainly try to torture black from here on out and play for a win if somehow you manage to memorize all that theory and not get checkmated in the process. So going back from all of this insanity, there was another game. None of this was even played in a game. Queen e7 was actually played in a game, and then we had bishop to e2. And then we have pawn to d3. And so far, all of this is pretty close to the truth. Knight c3 is kind of forced, and then d captures e2. And here in the game, white actually made a mistake. White played d4, and black responded poorly, and the game ended in a draw anyway. But d3 should just be some sort of theoretical draw. After d3, we're going to have bishop takes f2, king takes f2, e1 equals queen, rook takes e1, and then this is the drawing idea beginning with knight g4. And if you don't see the draw, it's basically a draw that ends in perpetual check. You're going to have king f1, knight h2, and then you're going to have king g1, which attacks the knight, and you're also attacking the queen. You're threatening rook captures queen. So they have to play queen takes e1, king takes h2, and now white is up an entire piece, and he is threatening to actually finish his development. So black has nothing better than to just kind of take this perpetual check with queen e1, queen h4. So the line itself with knight takes f7 seems to leave a lot to be desired. Because at the very least, it almost appears that black has this draw basically by force, beginning with queen to e7. So if we go back and take a look at our options here, knight f7 doesn't appear to be the way to go. So another move that we can try that's not the main theoretical move of knight e4 is the move c takes d4. This appears potentially reasonable, and it appears like white's getting an advantage here. A lot of top players have actually played this with the white pieces, and it's something that if you computer check it, it seems to kind of hold up. C takes d4, queen g5, and then you have bishop b5 check. This is the big crux of the whole thing. You're getting in this check. This is a big defensive resource in pretty much every line, is you're trying to get in this bishop takes b5, you're developing this bishop with check, and it's a huge, huge tempo for white's defensive resources. So bishop takes b5 check, king d8, we're going to castle kingside, and white's position is holding up, but it's a little scary. Black is going to put this bishop on the long diagonal, and of course there's a huge threat for mate against g2. He's just threatening something like knight f4, so we have to respond very carefully and very accurately. So the correct move is queen f3, which is super anti-instinctual. to put your queen directly in the line of fire of this knight f4 move. So of course the very natural move here is going to be something like rook b8. Let's just go ahead and threaten to play knight f4, or knight e3, and we should just ignore it. We should say, go ahead and do your worst. We should actually just play d takes e5. There was a game that was played between Shabalov and Ivanov, which Ivanov won, that continued with the question mark move queen g3. And this allowed the exchange of queens, and then e captures d4, and black was actually doing really, really good in this position, and black eventually went on to win that game back in New Jersey in 1996. So we are supposed to just be cold-blooded and go ahead and take this pawn. And again, you have to be very focused on just having really solid preparation and really good engine analysis in these lines, because you can't go off of general principles. Queen g3 is a really good principled move, but you need to be cold-blooded and you need to take this pawn. And the whole point is after knight e3, what you're going to do is you're going to play queen h3, and then, of course, they're going to play queen g2, knight g2, and it looks like you're going to be significantly worse here. But again, just nice cold-blooded move, d4. And you would think that you're in trouble. Like, as soon as this knight moves away, like knight h4, you've got threats on the f3 square. But you've got tactics that hold this whole position together. You can just play bishop g5 check, and then you can rip this knight and simply finish your development, and absolutely everything is fine. White is still up the pawn, and white has a major advantage. So the tactics and everything are working out. White should have a major advantage in this position, and you can go ahead and play from here. Black is by no means completely lost. He's got the bishop pair as compensation for his pawn, but white should clearly be better here. White's got more space, and white has an extra pawn. So again, going back, c takes d4, totally reasonable attempt for white to try to play for a win. Just requires some very specific theoretical knowledge. The other totally reasonable attempt is just knight e4, and I think maybe this is the best way to go. And it's interesting because this is the oldest line. This is the line that goes back kind of the farthest, and it's actually held up all these years, which is kind of amazing, because in most of these lines, if you look at the old main lines and the things that people used to play, we got these things so unbelievably wrong without the help of computers and without the help of engines. But we are fortunate that with stuff like the Fritz and the Ulvstad, that these lines were very, very popular in correspondence play, and the accuracy level for a lot of these lines was just much, much higher. Knight e4 was a good move then, and it's actually probably still a good move now for white to try to play for a major advantage. So the main line runs queen h4, knight g3 is forced, and then we're going to have bishop to g4, pawn f3 is forced. So the nice thing about these moves is they're all forced. We're going to have knight f5 going after the g3 square. E4 is also possible, and this is a whole nother can of worms. So like pawn to e4, we would have something like cd4, bishop to d6, and then bishop b5 check, king d8, castles kingside. And all of this is supposed to hold up for white, although the position's incredibly complex. It would go something like e takes f3, queen b3 is apparently the only move. Knight to b4, fg2 is also possible, like fg2, rook f2, bishop e6, queen f3, and then something like this, and white's position is apparently, this is decisive advantage white. White's stopped the attack, and white's doing very well. Like I said, the other way this can go is instead of fg2, we're going to have knight b4, rook f3. You got to take with the rook, not the pawn, because you've got to prevent the threat of, bishop takes g3 followed by mate. So that's the whole thing is, again, general principles out the window. You're defending. You got to find perfect moves. So rook f3, c6, a3, takes on f3, queen takes f3, rook e8, just cold-blooded, take the knight. Rook e1, bishop back to f1 to defend everything, queen takes d4, king h1, bishop g3, hg3, queen c4, knight a3 with tempo, queen takes f1, and then all this, and white is surviving. He has two pieces for the rook, and he should be able to finish his development. He should be able to finish his development with starting either with knight c2, or pawn to b3 and bishop b2. So Again, very exacting stuff. You got to get all of this exactly right, otherwise you're going to be completely losing. So going back here, the majority of people, I would say, don't play the move pawn to e4, even though it is a move you have to be familiar with. The majority of people continue with knight f5, and this has been very well known for a long time. Bishop takes b5 should lead to major advantage white. You're going to have bishop takes b5, king d8, castles kingside, bishop c5 check. You've got to play d4 here. You need that developing move to get your bishop into the game. E takes d4, and then knight to e4 is supposed to be decisive advantage white. So white at this point has completely consolidated and pushed back black's attack, even though this position is still absolutely incredibly scary. So this is how you face the Fritz and the Ulvstad variation. These are all the topical lines. These are all the topical variations. This is how you grab this pawn and then just kind of hang on for dear life and hope you don't get mated. You need to know your theory very, very exactly if you're going to play this line. It's one of the reasons that a lot of guys won't even bother with knight g5 anymore. There's too many variations that lead to perpetual black gets to have all the fun, and the reward at the end of it is just that if you do everything absolutely right, it's maybe slight advantage white at the end of everything. And it's a lot of theory to memorize. But if you're going to play this line and you're going to play it on kind of the top levels, these are the lines that you need to memorize. You need to be able to face the Fritz. You need to be able to face the Ulvstad. And of course, you've also got to have a lot of preparation against, knight a5. And you've got to know what to do against that as well. So anyways, I hope that you found this video helpful. I hope you learned something new about chess, and I hope you can use these ideas in your own games. Thank you very much for watching.